to Superpowered the Show. I'm Regina Joseph.
And I'm Nick Hare.
And together we'll be bringing you the latest signals and forecasts on geopolitics, economics, technology, and anything else that rings our bell. But first, we'd like to give a shout out to Phil Tatlock and Dan Gardner for the release of their book, Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction, which is out this week. The book details the results of the Good Judgment Project, the groundbreaking program led by Phil Tatlock and funded by the U.S. intelligence community. It was designed to identify who are the most accurate forecasters on geopolitical and economic outcomes and what did they do to achieve that. The four-year experiment involved thousands of forecasters all over the world, and it identified an unusually accurate group of forecasters that were consequently dubbed the Superforecasters. And that's how Nick and I met, as we were designated two of the 250 Superforecasters identified from the thousands of participants in that program. We encourage our viewers to check out the book and to read the amazing story behind this fascinating four-year study. And now on to what we do on the show, which is to Superforecast. Hey Nick, guess who's in the U.S. today?
The Pope.
Well, that's an interesting response in and of itself. You're right. POTUS will be hanging out with not only the Pope, but he'll also be breaking bread with Xi Jinping, the president of China, who will be heading to Washington later this week. But today, President Xi is in Seattle, and that is the subject of our Signal Forecast this episode. As we record this episode, Xi is meeting with the heads of various tech companies, including Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, among others, and where he'll be delivering a speech to them about hacking theft, China's cyber espionage activities, and he will also be likely urging these CEOs to push back against potential Washington sanctions against China. But our forecasting question focuses on a more critical issue that Xi may or may not be discussing. Recently, China stated that foreign companies doing business in China must officially sign a pledge allowing the Chinese state oversight for a number of operating restrictions, including backdoors into encrypted technologies and communications, bans against any material deemed incendiary by the Chinese, and an effective promise to Beijing that all products would be secure and controllable. Considering the tortured history that companies like Yahoo and Google have had in China, this is no small thing. With the promise of dollar signs yielded by China's enormous market, would that be enough to coerce companies who claim to not be evil, acquiesce to China's demands by signing the pledge? So far, we haven't really seen any takers, but in a rocky market, how long can tech behemoths hold fast to ethics before cold hard cash? So that's our forecasting question for this episode, which is, will Google sign the Chinese cyber pledge before 31st December 2015? For myself, I would even extend that beyond Google to include Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, the so-called GAFA companies. I'm going high on the negative on this one, Nick, even though you could say that in the past Yahoo and Google have chosen to ignore China's censorship and human rights issues in favor of getting on with the business of doing business. I think this might be a bridge too far. I'm forecasting a 25% chance that Google, or quite frankly any of these companies, will sign a pledge as it is before the end of this year. So what do you think, Nick?
Okay, interesting. Well, there's a bit of background we haven't discussed here, which is Snowden, which is in the background of this whole topic, which is, obviously the Snowden revelation showed that some of these tech companies were tacitly cooperating with the US government and giving sensitive user data to organizations like the NSA for national security purposes. Obviously, the Chinese don't want Chinese user data to be handed over to the NSA, and if you look at the text of this pledge, it's really all about what happens to user data. They're not being asked to sign up to political sanctions or anything. What they're being asked to do is keep the data in China and also to make sure that users are aware what's being collected. So it's not it's a fairly mild set of pledges. and I think in this sort of situation is the way to approach it, the way that I approach it is to say, well, what's in it for Google if they sign? What's in it if they don't? What's in it for them? First of all, to gain market share in China. Google currently has a very low market share in China because of its historical difficulties with the Chinese government. And in theory, I think it could get around this pledge. It could sign the pledge, and then if it wanted to, just not collect user data, destroy the user data at the point of use. But on the they won't sign side, I think first of all, the main thing really is the negative publicity. To be seen to be acquiescing to Chinese government demands. Obviously, also there will be concerns about Google's relationship in the US with the US government, which is obviously a much more important partner for them. And Google have happily thumbed their noses at the Chinese in the past. So my feeling is that they've got very little to lose by not signing this. It's not like they have a huge market share in China which is in jeopardy. So I think they will play the long game and think, our credibility is worth more than the quick win of getting into China. So my feeling is very similar to yours. And perhaps I should say, we don't collaborate, we don't talk about our forecasts in advance, but I've gone for 20%. So quite closely aligned to yours.
Okay, the game is afoot. So join us as we track this forecast and others over the course of the next couple of months. And stay tuned to our show coming up at the end of the year, where we'll be tracking most of the forecasts as they resolve at the end of December. So in the meantime, we urge you to send us your ideas, thoughts, comments, criticisms, especially ideas for questions to forecast on. And you can send them to us either at our Twitter feed, which is at super_powered, or also to our Facebook feed. We'd love to hear your ideas, and we'd love to know what you're thinking. So that's about all for me. Anything else from you, Nick?
No.
So join us again next week, and we'll see you then.